So welcome to this episode of Menopause Conversations. I'm Samantha King. I'm an executive performance coach and a menopause coach, and I'm absolutely delighted as part of this second season to welcome my next guest, Rebekah Brown. Hey, Rebekah, how are you?
Hey, thank you for having me. I'm very well, thank you.
You're really
delighted
welcome.
to be here.
Oh, it's really lovely. Sorry, it was a little bit, we already talked about the gremlins, so we're going to say that up front. If any gremlins pop in, please just stick with us. It will be so worth it. So this is such a treat, actually, because when we think about menopause is just such a multifaceted topic. And we're very aware of all the HRT, the medicalized part of it, but there's so much more to this powerful equation that is menopause, and that's why I wanted to get you on, Rebekah, to talk to you about it. So how about you start by introducing yourself, let people know who you are and what you are about.
Thank you. So I'll try and keep this concise with my brain fog. So yeah, thank you for the introduction. I'm the founder, and I often describe myself as chief guinea pig as well, of Mpowder. We're a co-creation community, which basically means we do the research, we work with people far cleverer than myself, medical practitioners, naturopaths, holistic experts, in order to create products and programs for women transitioning through midlife. At the moment, we're 12 months old. We have 2 supplement formulations available as a result of community trial and verification. We also have digital programs that run every month that are voted on by our community. So we cover off everything from cognitive behavioural therapy to cold water therapy, whatever the topics are that we're kind of curious about in midlife. And our ambition really is to reframe this life stage, as you were saying when you're talking about sort of the life stage as a whole. We are very supportive of the medical interventions that are available, but we're also very conscious that it's a whole body and mind experience. And actually, if we can reframe the way we view menopause as a sort of stepping up point rather than a fading away, part 2 can be phenomenal. It's just about sort of plugging in those gaps and maybe packing a new toolkit for part 2.
I love that. Definitely. I think more tools the better as well, isn't it? You know, because you can become your own do-it-yourself expert, and that's the thing, because every woman's journey is unique to her, isn't it? Like her fingerprint, and so one size definitely doesn't fit all. And midlife, I like that phrase, actually. And I think it captures the journey of menopause brilliantly, because menopause is so misunderstood, isn't it? You know, we don't use the right terminology about it, for a start, and the fact that it happens in our mid-30s and can go to our 50s, 60s and onwards, you know, we've misunderstood it already. So yeah, you're absolutely right, it's that whole midlife thing. So how did you get here, Rebekah? You know, can you tell us something about your personal journey, if that's not too intrusive, just to ask you how you got to be here with Mpowder?
Yeah, and it's kind of, I often describe it as a sort of a personal journey that became a public mission. So it definitely wasn't a sort of carefully plotted career trajectory. My background is I'm a creative researcher, and basically that means I'd spent my whole career prior to Mpowder listening to people. That's kind of what creative researchers do. So my job was often to sit at the intersection between big fat corporate brands trying to engage better with their consumers and trying to understand better wants and needs, and also kind of future trends and the needs of society as a whole. So I absolutely love my job. I'd been doing it, you know, from university onwards, and then the perimenopause hit. And at the time I didn't even know what that thing was, but I was knocked sideways and went really over a period of 6 months from being relatively comfortable in my own skin. You know, I think most of us have imposter syndrome as females, but I had been doing my job for 20 years. I felt relatively capable, and then I went from feeling okay about my job and loving what I did to this indescribable anxiety, which meant that I was lost for words, which I obviously now know is a factor of what happens to our brain during menopause. But for me, I lost my confidence in public speaking, which is a lot of what researchers have to do. I actually lost my confidence in social situations. So I would be waking up and panicking about, you know, a conversation I might have to have in the lift on the way up with a client, you know, before I even got into the meeting room to do my presentation. And because I was a hardworking type A personality, I just started working harder and harder. So I'd get up even earlier, I'd script my presentations, I'd rehearse what I was going to say so it could sound off the cuff. My hair was falling out. I had hormone time, and I really thought there was something very, very wrong with me. And it got to the point really where I couldn't continue doing my job well. Like about 75% of women in our community, I ended up going to the doctors, quite convinced that maybe there was something like early onset Alzheimer's or something really wrong with me. And like many of us, I was diagnosed as likely to be burnt out or depressed, as opposed to perimenopause being recognised as the symptoms that I was describing. And I kind of knew in my heart of hearts that I wasn't depressed. You know, my moods fluctuated and it just didn't seem to kind of correlate with how I was feeling. And I consider myself incredibly lucky because I was a business owner. I was able to choose to take 6 months off. And I did that because I felt so unwell. And many women aren't able to do that. But I think that gave me the space. And then because I'm a researcher, I kind of did what came naturally. I decided to try and research this thing that I was experiencing. And that was the long, convoluted route to discovering, you know, one, that this life stage existed and no one had told me. So I went through quite cross about that, to then kind of going quite deep into, okay, so this thing happens to us in our mid 30s, early 40s. It has a massive impact on our bodies and minds. I had no idea that hormones impact every single cell in our body. And of course, when I looked at my symptoms, you know, the gut ache, the bloating, the food intolerances, the hormonal acne, all of those things were absolutely, you know, you could draw a thread back to what was happening with my hormones. And the more I looked into it, I started talking to, you know, experts in their field, because I'm not, you know, I'm always really clear to highlight that I'm not an expert in menopause. I'm just someone who does a lot of data crunching. And the more I spoke to these amazing people, the more I realized there's this growing body of evidence. And although menopause is woefully under-researched and underfunded as a topic, there are some really exciting insights around the potential both of nutrition, of how we digest stress in terms of the external factors that impact how we feel and the impact those have on our hormones. You know, the value of HRT as part of that mix, the value of rethinking what your priorities are, and also a very optimistic view, actually, when you look at the science as to what happens as we transition through menopause into part 2. And I guess that's when Mpowder began to form into more of a concept. The key thing that I came away from after 6 months of research was there's a real need to rethink the way that we approach midlife and beyond, because we're incredibly privileged as a generation in that if we're lucky, we may live 40 to 50% of our lives postmenopausal, which is why it's really important, to your point, that we don't think of it as something that happens way down the line. It is a midlife point for our generation. But secondly, you know, there's a huge opportunity in terms of the value that females bring to society that's being lost at the moment as a result of perceptions and our own experiences of this life stage. And that's why I really wanted to kind of, I guess, harness and address with this community. And the final thing that really drove, I guess, the business model was the recognition that the worst feeling, I think, for many women is that we feel sort of unheard, and that makes us doubt our own bodies. You know, we will go on average 3 or 4 years before perimenopause is identified as the reason behind our symptoms, and within that time many of us will visit the doctor on multiple occasions and not get that kind of life stage identified. And that has a really big impact on how we feel. It can feel incredibly lonely as a life stage. You know, suicide at its highest, relationships break down, 1 in 10 of us leave the workplace. And it was really important to me that if we were going to do anything with all of this information I gathered, we had to do it with the women we were looking to serve, which is why everything we do is done in collaboration with the community. And, you know, a year on, it's been, I wouldn't necessarily recommend launching a business in a pandemic, but it's been, I think, that community and that sense of generosity of spirit and almost like co-ownership that has occurred as a result of being so open has really been what's driven us forward and got us to where we are today.
Wow. Wow. I mean, I love all of what you're talking about there, because it's not easy to start anything at any point when you're transitioning, is it? Let alone with a pandemic. I mean, I started my business when I was at the height of my perimenopause symptoms, and when I felt most anxious, most unheard. I'm very public about how my own experience, I was classed as worried well by my GP surgery. That was on my notes. And I could almost see people tut when I sort of came in the door with my 7th or 8th menopausal symptom, and they were just sort of thinking, the advice was, did I need a holiday? Yeah, I needed a holiday from the perimenopause. That's what I needed. So you're absolutely right. I think it's in these times, and this is something I, with your permission, want to sort of jump on, which is that all too often I think we focus on the negative sides of what it is to transition through midlife, with all that it brings, children leaving home, relationships breaking up, possible death of our parents, all of these big life challenges that come at us. And I'm a firm believer that often those things are already in the background when perimenopause turns up. And really what it does is it spotlights the cracks that possibly were already there, the issues that we weren't dealing with. And my role as a coach, that's why it usually pops up. That's why the topic usually crops up, either for men or for women. What I like about what I heard you say there was about really your philosophy that you talk about at Mpowder, and that collaboration with your community. Tell us a little bit how that interface works then between the people who buy your products, the people who engage with the fantastic services. By the way, we're going to put the website. I was laughing. I was saying to Rebekah last night, I was in bed and I thought, oh gosh, this is so interesting. I mean, a good half an hour had gone, Rebekah, before I'd finished reading everything. It was absolutely brilliant and very intuitive as well, the website. So do take a look. But yeah, tell us a little bit about that philosophy then, because, in a pandemic, launching a business, some people would be forgiven for thinking about, it's all about the profit. It's all about, our rankings in that nutrition part of the market. But I get the impression it's so much more than that for you. So tell us about your philosophy.
Thank you. And I will. And actually, before I do, I think it's really interesting that you found your purpose and drive in the perimenopause, because actually, statistically, and when you look at the kind of ethnographic research around this life stage, that is what happens. And what I find fascinating is so many women in our community have either a pivot to do something else during their perimenopause and menopause transitions, or they kind of find a purpose in addition to the work that they're doing, which really drives them forward. And as we emerge from our menopause transition, we are seen to be, and the kind of statistics back this up, our empathy grows, our sense of purpose grows, the grey matter in our brain grows, because we have to have somewhere to store all of that wisdom. We're more likely to succeed as entrepreneurs. We're actually much better to back than a kind of 21-year-old in flip-flops in San Francisco. And yet we're kind of made to feel like this is a end of life, kind of like death knell, like you were saying. So many other things occur with it that sometimes bring to the front either cracks or just the kind of, the heavy stuff of life, which can really sort of slow us down and bog us down and leave us feeling a little bit lost. And yet, if we can find the support around it, it really is an opportunity. And I find it phenomenal that, as you say, it's often, if you looked on paper, you'd go, yeah, don't do this now, because you're going through a massive hormonal shift. And yet every woman I know will have done something, in the way that you have, and the way I did. I ended up launching a business whilst in the middle of struggling with the symptoms I was looking to learn about. And I think there's something really interesting about that, and actually very optimistic about what that means for us as women.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I do think it is that, that lovely message that you give out on every sort of square inch of your website and in all the articles I've read about you and the interest in your business. Because there's no doubt about it. I was looking at the value of the menopause sector, and right now, what it's a massive 4.47 billion euros. I don't know why I haven't put it in pounds, but that's what it is in euros. And only last week we had Gwyneth Paltrow talking about her struggles with menopause. It does seem that there's a menopause conversation on every street corner, and for that I'm grateful. But we will come on through our discussion to talk about what does that mean, though, because not all, we need to be careful, don't we? We need to be careful about where we're getting our information from.
Yeah.
We need to really know what we're doing and what we're investing in, and, you know, the provenance of those things that we're using, you know, because not all supplements are the same. I think that's a really, really important point to note. So when we think about the equation of midlife, and we think about things like sleep, exercise, stress, you know, that's the biggie. It doesn't matter what, you know, that's the big one. Unless we get that under control, you know, it's going to be effectively quite difficult. How do you see, I mean, what do you describe Mpowder as, you know, in that mosaic, or that big equation? What is it and what isn't it?
Yeah, so we are, I describe us as a co-creation community for curious minds, and that really is the ethos behind it. It's a group of females, you know, there's over 13,000 of us now, sort of actively learning with each other. And we make things. So we work with the best medical practitioners and naturopaths with our formulated powders. We also look to educate and kind of interrogate interventions, you know, so to your point, you know, what is it that we need to kind of get a handle on first? You know, how do we digest stress as individuals as we transition through this life stage? What tools might be helpful? Why are so many women heading to the beach at 5 a.m. to swim? What is it about the water? What's the science behind cold water therapy, for example? And so all of that is designed, I guess, to give women agency for their health, and the ability, to your point at the beginning, that these menopause journeys we go through are incredibly unique. They're not just actually the result of our own biology, they're also the result of the cultures we grow up in, the narratives we inherit, all of that stuff. And so it really is that desire for females to learn from each other. And I think that's what's really fascinating actually about women's health generally, and females when we have the opportunity to come together. We're really good at sharing stuff, and actually we're really keen to pass on our knowledge. And so when you speak to women post-menopausal, one of the first things they'll say to you is, you know, I just want people to know that I learned this, and this. And I really hope so-and-so doesn't, you know, go through the same experience I go, because we want to pass it on, because I think maybe because it's an underserved market, maybe because as a gender we grow up always feeling like other, you know, always feeling like we have to kind of fit in a world that isn't female shaped. That we tend to almost feel like it's our responsibility to help each other. And I think harnessing that is a really beautiful thing. And I would say that actually one of the most kind of satisfying elements of Mpowder is a sense of belonging. I think when you can kind of remove that sense of loneliness that can come with a life stage that no one's told you about, and that you don't necessarily feel you can talk about with your immediate peers or your partner, because let's not forget, 2 in 3 of us still see it as a taboo. So you and I are obviously quite comfortable telling our menopause stories, but even people on our blends in our community will talk to the fact that they are very glad to be here, very glad to be talking in the way that we do on Zoom sessions, and in environments where actually they're with people, but they're outside their immediate social circle. If you ask them to have the conversation in the playground, or actually step up to a friend and act as a menopause whisperer, as I often call them, they don't want to necessarily do it, because they recognize that person may not be ready to acknowledge where they are in their life stage because of all the taboo around it. So it's a sensitive life stage to navigate, but you know, so much better done together.
That's so, I agree with everything you just said there, because it's you know, it's one of the biggest concerns in the corporate world when I'm talking about menopause. People don't know how to approach the subject, and we've already made it too big. You know, we've made it this big conversation that nobody wants to have, and I often encourage people to say, you know, how would you speak to someone who you just heard, you know, might be going on maternity leave? How would you speak to someone who you just heard had a bereavement? You do it with compassion, you do it with kindness. Oh, a cat, lovely.
That's a tail. Yes.
A tail, beautiful.
She does have this habit. Yes, I'm sorry, I apologise.
No. I love cats. My cat always comes in. I do expect for this door to just burst open. Lots of people think there's some sort of, you know, spooky happening here. It's not. You tend not to see the cat. The cat's just come in to announce its arrival.
Yes,
but no,
exactly.
lovely.
To join in.
Yeah, exactly. And so those conversations can be really, really hard. And then for people don't want to create situations where that conversation may or may not happen. So we have that whole avoidance thing. going on. But I mean, like when we first came on the call, I mean, you asked me how I was. I said, yes, I'm fine. And then I came back and first of all told you I've just been to the clinic. And, you know, women just love, you know, there's no stop. Well, certainly with me, I have found, because I've already done the difficult conversations, there's not a part of my body that hasn't been examined. So, you know, I'm just willing to overshare. But you're right, it's a journey. And when communities like this exist, that's where it becomes powerful. So if you don't mind, let's talk about what a week for menopause. You know, the views on HRT shortages, the appointment of a czarina today, not a czar, a czarina to sort out these HRT issues. But the area is exploding with campaigners, celebrities, investors. What do you make of it? You know, what's your opinions, Rebekah, on that?
Well, I think we have to be optimistic, and we also have to apply the wisdom that comes with midlife, and apply a healthy level of you know, rigor to what we evaluate. You know, to your point, it is a commercial space because all life stages are commercial on some level. So I think from a sort of investment point of view, although we're seeing far more investment in the menopause space, if you look at it, it's still tiny. So I think like 1.29% of VC investment goes into female founded businesses, and a tiny percentage of that goes into menopause. If you look at research, something like 2% of you know, public backed research initiatives are female fertility or gynae focused in the UK. So we don't know enough about menopause, and so we, in some ways, the commercialization of the space, it can be quite helpful, because with money comes greater choice, greater innovation. You know, why isn't there the kind of smart supplementation and tools in menopause that you see in other life stages? And I think all of that's to be welcomed, but to be approached, you know, as a consumer with the wisdom that we carry, that we know that we're being sold to as well. Some really interesting research last year that from a company called Gen M, who actually sort of almost acts as a lobby foundation to encourage greater awareness around menopause and work, but also sort of greater attention on it as a life stage. And they're quite open about the fact that this, you know, commerciality can help, and 95% of women in the UK, I think it's 94 actually, are cited as saying that they would welcome brands tackling this topic head on, because we're looking for stuff that works. And it's almost like, you know, when I look at the menopause space, it's not so dire as it was when I was navigating it, but it felt like an end of life category. You know, I remember going into my local health food store and just thinking, this isn't me. This is like lots of women with dentures and standing in cornfields, and they're sort of looking frail, and they look about 80, and even the 80-year-olds I know don't look like that anymore. And you know, it felt like it was a category, if you were going to use kind of commercial terms, that just people had become lazy in. And you know, many of the purchases we make in menopause would be described as distressed purchases, in that we're desperate, and you know, we cycle through that supplement aisle because we're really hoping that something will work. But the sort of the rigor and the intelligence that maybe is applied at fertility, or just generally the wellness category, which is really fast track our understanding of bioavailability and the importance of prebiotics, and you know, when a supplement's actually going to work or not, depending on what profile is in that kind of pill. None of that really was being applied to menopause. So I think the fact that it has been sort of sized as a market is a positive thing. I think the HRT shortage is a scandal, but there's a sort of, I guess there's a silver lining in the fact that part of the reason for the issue is the fact that women are going back into their GP surgeries. We have, I think, in the last 24 months managed to destigmatize HRT, and also sort of ensure that people understand that WHI study, which was 20 years ago now, was woefully misrepresented in terms of the data analysis that came out of it, and really not that useful to us in terms of assessing safety. So what you're finding is a large group of women going into surgery with the knowledge now to actually have a proper conversation, and doctors increasingly being better trained to spot the symptoms. So all of those things are positive, because it means that women aren't waiting in the same way that they were maybe even 2 years ago to get access to medical intervention that can make a huge difference. Let's not forget, you know, HRT can impact not just how we're feeling, but sort of preventatively impact our risk of a number of really nasty diseases. so all of that kind of in a weird way points to the fact that this space and our awareness of it is changing. And I think your final point around celebrities, I think there's a real bravery in it. And although there might be an element of cynicism sometimes when people see celebrities talk to a topic, as particularly when there's been a big media spotlight on it, I still think we should celebrate the fact that they're doing it, because one of the things I think I've learned is that the more menopause stories that are told, the better. And we need lots and lots of them out there. And so it might be that, you know, Davina McCall's documentary really resonated with you and the people that were featured there really resonated, but it might be that you sat on the sofa and none of that chimed true for you. And the more the 11th, 12th one you hear, maybe you recognize something in yourself. So I kind of think we have to embrace it and allow it to happen. But I think as consumers, we just need to keep our, you know, we're smart, like we know when we're being sold to, so we just need to keep that front of mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Good answer. Good answer. Because actually it's quite divisive at the moment. You know, it's really divisive. So, you know, I'm happy to talk about that bit too, because you know, I'm part of that grassroots campaign, the Make Menopause Matter campaign that Diane Dancebrink was stood outside. You know, every news station was sort of taking pictures of her. We've got a menopause mandate group up and running now. You know, it sort of seems like we're saying the same thing, but we're not saying the same thing. For me, I'm in the same camp as you, in that I think actually the more noise, the better. If it gets the result and it gets the job done, I don't care where it came from, really. I think if we could all pull together, that would be brilliant. 173,000 people have signed the Make Menopause Matter campaign petition, which actually is about, you know, Diane got it on the school curriculum to talk about menopause. I mean, that's no mean feat. So that's, you know, my daughter who's 16 knows as much about menopause as I do, because we're talking about it, and it's brilliant. You know, she can't move for hearing about the menopause, but she's happy to.
No, and I agree. And I think the reason that I'm very cautious about sort of causing any further divisiveness is the thing that frustrates me a lot. You know, when we first came out to market, actually we felt a little bit of the spiky elbow, as I describe it. In that I think there was an assumption that because we'd listened to a community and we were making stuff and we were trying to fill the data gap, you know, we were making formulations and trying to establish whether supplementation, whole food supplementation works and what other interventions work. There's an assumption that we were therefore anti HRT, which we've never been, and we advocate for it and we provide a lot of education around it. And I kind of, when I look as a researcher at the way that females are often encouraged to behave, often by external forces, let's face it, usually the media, it's like, you know, breast or bottle, stay at home mum, working mum.
It's very polar, and then isn't it?
HRT, anti-HRT. It's like, I'm not anti-HRT, I'm kind of pro-choice. Everybody's arriving for this podcast. Hi.
Now that's great. That's great advertisement for looking after a menopauser. That's brilliant. I'll just wait for my door to open.
Exactly. So yes, I know.
No, that means no one's coming. No one's coming. Brene Brown's saying to me, no one's coming.
But yeah, I think there's a real issue with you know, one being assumptive about the fact that because you support something, you therefore don't support something else. And I think you know, it's a massive space that none of us own, and I think we just have to celebrate those early movers. I mean, Diane, and just the work she does and continues to do in such a sort of self-effacing, humble way as well. And there are going to be people that come into this space for different reasons, and it's kind of okay. That's kind of how life works. And I just think that you just have to recognize the value that people bring, and their motivations might be different, but that's kind of okay, because ultimately, you know, your point around the value of this market, actually, if you look ahead to 2 or 3 years, it's kind of pegged to be worth something like 600 billion, and which is just ridiculous. So we are going to see a massive influx of all of the brands that 10, 12 years ago were being lazy, you know, about this space, because they just didn't think that there was a consumer there, which is ridiculous. And it's going to be quite a sort of like a bitter pill to swallow, because we're going to feel suddenly sold to, because we are seen as dollar signs rather than humans. But I think we're going to have to sort of suspend that and just look for the upside. And for me, the upside is going to be, as you say, the fact that the work that has happened, although there's been an influx of attention and maybe some motivations that aren't as pure as you'd like, there has been the curriculum change.
Yes.
There has been more attention of menopause in the workplace. There are people like you doing great stuff and able to sort of talk about it in a more explicit way that maybe wasn't appropriate 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And so all of that's really good. And I think, as I say, I think we will all navigate it because we're smart and wise enough to recognize and then align ourselves with the stuff we feel comfortable with.
Yeah, and I think that is the key to it, isn't it? It's about, I love the fact that you're a researcher. That gives a lot of credence. Honestly, I think that's such a fabulous, unique selling point. Someone who actually really is invested and has done that work themselves. I became my own subject matter expert. I was speaking to respiratory doctors going, you do realize that more perimenopausals develop allergies, and they were like, no, so you do, and people that have done the work up front and are established, as you will be and already are, with 13,000 people in your community, people talk, don't they? And it's go, actually, this brand is great for me, it's really helpful. And I was sold on it. I made a purchase yesterday, so I'm really looking forward to that. Because I tell you, the biggest thing that annoys me, Rebekah, which your brand seems to have just really cured, if you go downstairs into my kitchen, I've got a whole drawer dedicated to supplements. Half opened bottles, things that I was really keen on for 2 weeks and then didn't, and some expiry dates that are so old, honestly, it's not even worth putting them in the compost bin. But the reality is that having it all in one place, when you haven't got the wherewithal because you're not good in the mornings, is brilliant. What a great fix for women who are navigating this midlife with any number of priorities going on.
Well, I think that's the interesting thing. I think when we were doing our research, obviously, what was fascinating is like everyone's got that covered, right? And it's actually full of, like you say, sort of individual vitamins, but we might have also kind of heard about ashwagandha. We might have got some moringa and some maca and some cacao and some collagen.
Have you seen my cupboard? You're looking at that is my cupboard.
And it's like, and then, I mean, it's also, without wanting to be scaremongery, the thing I was quite worried about when I was doing this sort of like research was that you kind of you start learning, obviously working with naturopaths and medical doctors, don't take this for more than 6 months, or don't combine this with this, that's really not good for you, or and none of that is actually very readily available when we buy a supplement, because you buy them often in isolation. Women kind of make their own cocktail, and then it's really hard to work out what's working, and so we lose confidence, and we sort of, the habit is really hard to stick to. You're thinking, well, is it the calcium that I'm taking, or is it the fact I got, so I think the thing that we set out to do was twofold. One was recognize the benefit actually of whole food ingredients. So we're a powder, which is quite unusual, and it's largely whole food led because of the bioavailability. And then the vitamin and minerals are in there at the dosage levels that kind of chime with the research potential. Because often it sounds really obvious, but I remember when I first sort of tiptoed into this space, I was thinking, well, no wonder it's so difficult for us as women to navigate, because someone asked me when my early meetings, we didn't go on to work together, I hasten to add, but they asked me whether I'd like the marketing dose or the therapeutic dose. And I was like, what's the marketing dose? And they're like, it's the minimum amount that you can put in to have on the back of pack. And I was like, obviously I'll have the dose that works, but not the
there you go. Yeah,
and but that's how the space can operate if you're not careful. And how are we supposed to know that as consumers? So I think, the other thing to say is, and you've obviously not opened your pouch yet, you only purchased it yesterday, but our stuff's bitter. It's really important to say that. And there's a reason for that as well, right? And it's learning about, this has been a whole journey for me, but our stomach acid also decreases as we transition through menopause. So some of those gut discomforts and bloating, and they're to do with the fact that we can't actually break down the food that's going into our stomachs particularly well. And if you have something bitter on your tongue, it increases the stomach acid production. It prepares your stomach basically for digestion. So there's many things that are sort of in the rationale for our blend, that hopefully, we obviously do the tracking and we're learning all the time, but I think that's probably why people do see quite a significant impact if they can be consistent with it. And to your final point around kind of waning and not sticking with something, the other interesting thing about powder when we did our research is is people can chuck it into a normal routine. So if you're having a smoothie, you know, or if you're having porridge, or you're having your yogurt, you know, if you can hook anything, I mean, you'll know this as a coach, but if you can hook any new habit to an existing habit, you're much more likely to stick with it.
I love it. That's James Clear's principle in Atomic Habits, isn't it? Habit stacking.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
habit stacking. And that is so true. I bought collagen powder, fish collagen powder. Now that takes some getting used to.
But do you know what? There's an acquired taste.
Yeah, there's an acquired taste. Definitely need some flavouring with it. But do you know what? I finished 2 whole packets of that because I could add it into something. So you're absolutely right. But you know, and it is that we find our own level of motivation around stuff, and that's what really interested me, which is why I was so keen to get you on this podcast, because I think it is a really interesting space. You know, I was in Boots this morning. The shelves are heaving. You know, 2/3 of any boot store is at supplements. And you know, and there's a whole dizzy array, isn't there? And before you know it, you've got all of it in your basket, all with good intentions. And actually, you, like you said, that's what I love what you said. You know, how do you know what's working? Because you can't tease that out. You know, we're not skilled in that way. So just very quickly, how do the powders work then? So is it a standard measure, a standard dose, and you can add it into your smoothies? How does it work?
How do you take it? Yeah. So there's 2 things that you know, we try and ensure gives you that kind of, we often describe ourselves as a sort of supplement brand for skeptics. And so 2 things. One is we always encourage people to track their symptoms with us. So when your pouch arrives, you'll get a little email from us, and that allows you to sign up if you want to. Around 28% of our customer base will track their symptoms for the first 30 days, which is kind of the life of a first pouch.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about that is, obviously that data is really valuable because we're a small business and we do sort of artisanal production runs, really small runs at the moment, because we're always tweaking. So, you know, that feedback loop allows us to keep refining and improving and addressing the symptoms we're having an impact on. And so, but it also for you means that around 15 days in, if you've been taking it every day, you should be seeing a downward trajectory. And most people, it's usually sort of energy levels, and particularly if you've had a bit of bone ache, you start to sort of suddenly notice that that's not as persistent. And if you're not seeing a downward trajectory, we can see that you're not seeing a downward trajectory as well, and we're able to intervene. So we have it's a very sort of hands-on protocol. You'll have an outreach from our health concierge, an invitation to have a call if you want it, or additional information relating to that particular symptom, because we're not a silver bullet either. And it might be that you do need, I don't know, to practice some meditation techniques, or you may be curious about sleep hygiene, or, you know, so that we're able to provide additional support should you need it. And then the end of month 1, you'll receive a personalized report, which kind of shows you what you've told us, but also then gives you additional ideas. So I think that's how it works, in that it's a layering up, as you and I were saying at the beginning. It's kind of recognizing that there are many things we can be doing, and hopefully our foundational powders do just that. They act as a foundation. And then in terms of how they work themselves, they kind of behave a bit like protein powders. So there's 2 different blends. There's one for perimenopause and one for when you've had your menopause. And the Peri Boost one is quite protein and fiber heavy, because we find that women are often not getting enough of either of those things in their diets. And it's got moringa in it, it's got maca, it's got cacao. It's got this amazing member of the mint family called Moldavian dragon head, which is really good.
Yes, I saw that on the back. I was very intrigued about that. I was like, what? Whoa, what's that?
Best name ever. So that's a really exciting botanical that's got some good peer-reviewed data against it, but hasn't actually been used that much yet. We were quite early to include that in our
What does it help with, Rebekah?
So it actually helps stimulate collagen production, so the elasticity of skin, plumpness of skin, hydration. And we actually, when we first put it into our trial product, because it didn't have peer-reviewed data, I didn't really want to talk to it. I just wanted to see if it worked. And so with our trials, we sort of measure a number of symptoms. We said as a team, we're not going to actually ask them about skin or hair or nails, because and what's fascinating is people started contacting us. I mean, this is also the generosity of women in this life stage, but we were getting these emails in alongside our sort of data tracker from people in the trial going, I don't know if it's just me, but I've noticed like my skin is looking a lot better.
How interesting. And because you haven't preempted it with them.
No, it was really interesting. And then about a year later, because obviously our trials happened a long time before we actually hit the shelves, about a year later, we got, you know, a note from the Biochemistry, which is the company we work with the Moldavian dragonhead, and they've actually done the peer-reviewed research now, which actually verifies what they'd seen in lab.
Fabulous.
But it's you know, so that's really exciting, because I think in perimenopause particularly, you know, it's that external manifestation just really impacts the way we feel about ourselves, and if we can help with that, that's fabulous. So yeah, in answer to your question, behaves like a protein powder. You can mix it with most things. The bitterness is something to prepare yourself for, because I think sometimes when you think something's going to be like a protein powder, you think it's going to taste of bananas and strawberries, and sadly it doesn't. It tastes of functional food, so it's got no masking, no sort of
no sweeteners, no. So what do you suggest people should do
in terms of taking it?
Well, just to sort of you know, so to deal with that bitterness, I mean, is there anything that particularly goes well with it to counter it?
So I mean, I think the lesson we've learned as a team is that every taste bud is different. So on the back of the pouches, there's a QR code with loads of recipes from our community. So we're always getting hacks and tips in from people. So some people do like it with water, and some people have it warm, almost like a sort of cacao sort of drink instead of their coffee. Some people blend it with their smoothie and it neutralizes the taste, and you know, other people actually love it. I mean, I have mine almost like an icy smoothie bowl. I kind of like to have it with a spoon. And nice. So I have mine so I have mine with some whatever greens basically haven't gone off in my fridge, and then like some frozen berries I just keep in the freezer drawer, sometimes a bit of avocado, sometimes a bit of banana, and I sometimes put some granola on it or some nut butter, so I almost treat it like a smoothie bowl, and that works really well as well. And I mean, it's really, and some people just have it with a plant-based milk, or some people even have it with juice, which I haven't tried actually, but some people just have it with a juice, and that can in a weird way also sort of neutralizes the taste. So it depends on your taste bud, and if you are really sweet tooth, then you can add a little bit of vanilla essence, or you can add a date, little hacks like that, just sort of soothe the taste a little bit. But now I'll be curious to see how
I can't honestly, I'm so excited. Where's the postman? He's not here yet. Should have fast tracked it, but it was free delivery, so that's always a good thing as well, just to say it was free delivery. So I'm really excited about that. One of the things I'm really passionate about, Rebekah, which I didn't say to you before, is I'm histamine intolerant, and histamine intolerance is something that definitely shows up more and more for perimenopause, as those hormones are fluctuating. Estrogen is like very connected to histamine, so I do have to be careful with certain things. And so I think what I like is the fact that I know what I can take. I looked at all the ingredients; those are all, you know, fairly highly tolerated by someone like myself who has histamine issues. But I don't know if I said to you, I actually had a DNA profile done, which was so helpful, actually. That might be an interesting quarter to take a look in. But DNA profiling, which really helped me sort out what would work for me and what wouldn't work for me. You know, caffeine sensitivity. Fortunately, I've got the gene that deals with caffeine, so that's not a problem for me. But I don't process histamine very well. So, you know, I think it is important that, you know, the more people can go to those communities where they can get that information, the more they can piece their own puzzle together, and to use that insight from the functional nutritionists, peer-reviewed articles. A lady contacted me on Instagram yesterday. She was a bit upset that I put a post out about someone who was recommending, you know, that stress, alcohol, how we eat, how we exercise could really impact, you know, menopause transition. And I said, actually, no, those things really can do. She was a little bit upset to think that people are just making everything negative. And I said, like you said, it's your personal response to those things, isn't it? You know, are you the sort of person that can survive on 5 hours and it doesn't affect your health, or do you need the 7.5? It's all of those things which are important. And what's really resonating from your website is that, you know, you don't spoon feed people. You're not forcing them to come on this journey. It's like, actually, if you're curious and you want to trust in the data, trust in the scientists, you've got a researcher here, for goodness sake, you know, you couldn't be in safer hands.
Well, I think, and I think you're right. And I think that kind of back to the spiky elbows, sometimes we do trigger stuff in people. And I think often it is because we do feel really lonely. And so, you know, that individual, whoever it was who felt cross, often it comes from a place, you know, we will get it as well as a community, because however much you try and assert you're open and inclusive and it's all about you working out what works for you, you know, you have to be really careful, because people will come back and go, well, I don't agree, and I'm sick of being told I can't have a drink. And it's like, you absolutely can have a drink, you know. And again, it's, you know, you chose to, but like you say, with Kathleen's a really good example. We work with a brilliant nutritionist who does quite a lot in terms of DNA testing actually with her clients, and she'll often say, you know, some people are absolutely fine, and I'm grateful that I'm one of your cohort, so I can still drink my coffee. But some people really struggle, and if you really struggle, it actually really helps to know that. And I think that's the thing, you know, you can choose what to do with that knowledge, and if you decide that you can't live without your coffee, that's absolutely fine. But it's that kind of knowledge is power piece, isn't it? And giving you agency. And I think we as females don't know enough. We're not taught enough about our own biology, and the world doesn't know enough about our own biology. So it's just being open to understanding, and then you decide what you do with it.
Yeah, that's lovely. So, we're coming to an end shortly, but I've got a few more questions. But maybe we could do a part 2 when things, you know, really get going. Mpowder. So, what would you consider to be your strengths, Rebekah? What would you consider to be your strengths at any point in your life that, you know, but that have got you to this point, I suppose?
I think actually it is that curiosity. So I think I've had a really sort of like odd career trajectory. I've often ended up in places and thought, how did that happen? And usually the common thread is that I've always just been fascinated by stuff. So, you know, when I was working agency side, I could get really excited about pretty much any brand that walked through our door, because it was an opportunity to explore how other people think or how another sector works. Or and when I think back to like my university days, I was an English and drama graduate, really bad, by the way, at drama, but what fascinated me was like kind of the literature bit, like how people thought in that text, and the stories and the culture. And so I think curiosity as we age as well is a really important thing to try and keep hold of. And one of the saddest things for me with perimenopause was I became really brittle, and because I wasn't coping, I became less and less open to changing anything. It was like, you know, I had to I think a lot of us get like that. It's like, you know, we become almost glass, don't we? And we have to do things in a certain way, and that even makes us more stressed and more tense. And when I actually started letting stuff go and exploring new things and going, I will go to that weird yoga class that I can't pronounce properly and just see like what's worse that can happen. I might feel better, and other people are going along. I'll go and try the morning swim in the Lido, because there's loads of women doing it. So what the worst that happens is I'll look like an idiot and I'll get out after 2 minutes, you know. And I think what I don't know if it's a skill, but I think what I'm grateful for is that kind of curiosity seems to be something that's always there for me, and I guess that's what's led to, you know, what's happening at the moment with Mpowder too.
Yeah, I think that's lovely, because I think we do become fragile. I lost sight of myself, definitely. My mum, I think, remember my mum saying to me, she said, I can't remember the last time I saw you smile.
Yeah.
You know, and it's things like that. You just go, oh my God. I mean, I would never have seen that in myself. I stopped wearing red. That was my signature colour. It was as bright as this. Used to wear red suit, red lipstick, you know, killer heels. Not that I could walk in heels, but I used to wear. You just sort of, you retreat. But you don't retreat to a good place generally, I don't think. Your world becomes smaller. Your conversations become much tighter, and I think actually having my daughter was the moment I just thought, it's now or never. You know, I'm either going to go for it, or I'm just going to retreat even further. And that wasn't an option for me. That wasn't, you know, that wasn't an option. So yeah, I like that. You use such lovely language, Rebekah. I mean, like glass. That's so right. It's that fragility, isn't it? You know, that we become really fragile, and I think some women don't come back from that very easily.
No. You know? Well, that's why it's amazing. You know, the work you're doing as well. I think it's a much better time. It's a much better time to be entering this life stage than even a couple of years ago. And hopefully, for your daughter and, you know, generations that follow, we won't be having to have these kind of conversations in the same way. I'm sure, you know, there's a lot of catching up to do. It's going to take a while, but you know, it does feel a little bit more optimistic, I think.
Definitely. And so when you think about the advice you would give, you know, hindsight's a great thing, isn't it? You know, do they sell that in Boots or any other chemist? You know, exactly. I don't think they do.
But we should bottle that.
We should bottle it. Can you get a powder for that? Because that would be a great one. A great one. But if you were to give some advice, and, you know, from your own experience, what would you tell your younger perimenopausal self based on what you know now? What would you say to her?
I mean, I do regret not going back to the doctor, you know, and again, as a researcher, I know that statistically that's what most of us do. We sort of accept that kind of prognosis, and we will go away for a few years before actually we go back and it's got worse. And I wish I hadn't done that. And my advice to my younger self, or anyone kind of listening to this podcast, is it's really important to make your GP your friend as soon as possible. You know, you might not decide that you need a protocol from your doctor at the very beginning, but just knowing that what you're going through is a biochemical stage. So, you know, do and I think what has happened in the last 24 months is there's a lot of amazing doctors actually on social media and LinkedIn and things, demystifying it, but also helping you identify where you might be in that journey. And if you can kind of go into your doctor armed with that, you don't have to choose to take a prescription, but you can then, I just think it just removes all of that fear. You're like, okay, this is something that happens, it's a natural transition. I can decide at what point I might want HRT. I can have a look at nutrition now. I can think about how I'm living and the things that cause me stress and anxiety. I can maybe have some important conversations. That would be my wish for people.
Hallelujah, because that's the thing, because I think women, because of the shortages with HRT, are stepping back. But the Mpowder option for me is really lovely, because I've been established on HRT and I'm getting to that stage where it's not enough. So the idea of Mpowder excites me, because it's like adding in without me having to up my HRT. Actually, it's like, no, I'm curious to know what the magnesium in the cacao, for example, will do for me in terms of my fatigue and my brain fog. I'm curious to know about that. And if that's just one spoonful in the morning when I'm still a bit like that, my eyes not quite open, I'm happy to go down that road. So I think that's a lovely aspiration to hope for, not just for yourself, but also for women going forward. So Rebekah, tell us, how can people be in touch with you? Because I'm sure people watching this will want to know more. And how can they know more about the product?
Thank you. Well, there's two ways. So I often describe our Instagram feed almost like a microblogging site. It's kind of full of content and lives with experts and stories. So that's, you can find us on Instagram at Mpowder Store, all one word. And then our website is www.mpowder.store. You can buy our range from there. You can also buy tickets to our digital events that happen every month. And then we're in places like Cult Beauty and John Lewis or Selfridges. So if it's easier for you to check us into a shop you're doing already, then you can find our product range in those stores.
Oh no, that's brilliant. So tell us, before you go, what's in store for Mpowder in the next 3 to 5 years? What's on the cards? Can you tell us anything?
I mean, it's tough. So at the moment we are looking to get more investment. So one of the challenges of being a trial and data-led company is it takes a lot of time, and it's probably not the commercially smart move, but I think it's the morally responsible smart move. So we spent a lot of time verifying products, and what we'd love to do now is all of that data we've gathered. There are so many things we want to bring to market, so the product range is going to expand with a big focus on post-menopause and aging well and cognitive health, and lots of exciting innovation happening there. And we'd just like to reach more people, make the product more accessible. You know, as we grow, I would love, you know, I worry all the time about wanting to reach women that really need us, and I would love the product to be cheaper, to be really frank. So at the moment I would describe this as a sort of artisanal product, and the challenge with that is that it costs a lot to put the good stuff in. So I would love to be doing it in bigger batches and being able to reach more people. And then a lot of our work, you know, chimes with the stuff you're doing, in that we want to be where women are as well. So, you know, we want to be in their workplaces providing content and support. We want to be working with other brands that you traditionally think as competitors, but we just want to support in the way that they are engaging with midlife women. So the aim is really to become that destination for curious minds in midlife, and to kind of have all of the content and the product sets that will make it easier.
Hallelujah to that. And I'm definitely excited to get through my 30 days, and I will definitely
please do let me know.
Tracker. I will let you know, now that we're in touch with each other. I absolutely will let you know. And I think women all the time ask me, in the corporate setting, in the one-to-one setting, what else can I be doing, Amantha? And so this presents a lovely opportunity to talk about that collaboration of all the things you are doing and something else to help you along the way. So yeah, I'd be delighted to tell you how I'm getting on. But for now, Rebekah Brown, thank you so much for your time. Oh, I feel so excited to have spoken to you. And
me too.
And I would urge anyone, particularly because this is going out on LinkedIn, it's going out on Instagram. So if there are any investors, get Stephen Bartlett tagged into this, because I know that he's very interested, isn't he, in the aging and then that sort of side of things. So we'll get this out there, and people, I'm sure, will be in touch. But for now, thank you so much, Rebekah.
Samantha, thank you. Thanks for having me.
You.